Angel Reese is clearly feeling the pressure right now, and the timing of everything unfolding around her has made the situation impossible for fans to ignore. Within the span of a single week, she walked into 2 different cities expecting support and momentum, and both experiences turned into difficult headlines for completely different reasons. First came Chicago on April 29th, where she returned to face the sky and ended up in a viral sequence after Camila Cardoso rejected one of her shots at the rim. What stood out wasn't just the block itself, but how little reaction there seemed to be from the crowd that once supported her. The emotional revenge game atmosphere many expected never truly materialized the way people imagined. Then came Atlanta, where expectations for her home debut with the Dream were supposed to reset the narrative. Instead, attendance became part of the conversation almost immediately, and the game itself only made things worse. Kiki Iriafen blocked Reese multiple times. Washington's younger players outplayed Atlanta for long stretches, and the Mystics walked away with an 11-point win. That's what has made the disconnect so noticeable. Reese continues to present herself as one of the biggest stars in the league, but the on-court results and overall reaction around these games haven't matched that level of hype lately. The scoring struggles, missed finishes around the basket, and rough offensive stretches have only added fuel to the criticism online. And now the debate keeps getting louder. Is the perception around Reese bigger than the actual impact we're seeing on the court right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Angel Reese preseason part 2, let's get it! So many fans in the stands, it's all filled to the brim to see you me-bound! How about it? Bang! You can really tell she's been in the lab all off-season working on that explosiveness. Look right here, she gets almost 2 inches off the ground. Me-bound!
How about that? You can definitely see she spent the off-season working on her explosiveness. And social media ran with clips like that for weeks. Every workout video, every training montage, every off-season post pushed the same message. Angel Reese was coming back stronger, more athletic, and ready to prove people wrong. Reese herself fueled a lot of that energy too. Throughout the offseason, she repeatedly made it clear she believed Chicago underestimated her value and that Atlanta represented a brand new beginning where she could finally take over as a true centerpiece. So when April 29th arrived and she returned to Chicago wearing an Atlanta Dream jersey, the buildup around the game exploded online. Fans weren't just expecting another regular season matchup, they were waiting for the revenge game Reese had been hinting at for weeks. At one point, there was even talk about her potentially dropping 50 points on her former team. 50 against a Chicago roster that was already missing key names like Skylar Diggins-Smith, Dejanai Carrington, and Azura Stevens. The stage was set perfectly for a statement performance. The spotlight was there, the storyline was there, and the expectations were sky high. On paper, it looked like the ideal opportunity for Reese to back up all the offseason confidence and noise surrounding her move to Atlanta.
What makes you her?
I'm really confident within myself. Nobody can tell me I'm not that girl. I wake up every morning.
And now she's in Atlanta. What's Atlanta giving?
Atlanta giving black girl magic. It's giving culture. It's giving lemon pepper wings. It's giving Atlanta Dream. It's giving everything. So I'm really happy to be in Atlanta. And make sure y'all come out and pull up.
You're gonna see me at a game. Best believe. Last question: Are you the art or the artist tonight?
I'm both. I'm the artist. I'm that girl.
But what made the situation even more noticeable was what happened before the game even started. Angel Reese skipped pre-game media availability entirely. That immediately stood out because throughout the entire offseason, she had been everywhere. Podcasts, interviews, social media clips, viral conversations, constantly speaking about her fresh start, her confidence, and everything she planned to prove moving forward. Yet when the spotlight shifted to a game that directly tied into the narrative she had been building for months, she chose not to speak publicly at all. And honestly, this wasn't completely surprising. Reese had already mentioned on a podcast before that she would rather pay a fine than deal with media sessions and situations where she felt her comments would be twisted or taken out of context. So when she returned to Chicago, she kept quiet, avoided the microphones, and let the performance on the court become the statement instead. The problem for Reese is that the game ended up telling its own story, and it wasn't the one she probably hoped people would be talking about afterward.
Angel Reese preseason basketball, we're back, baby. 3 ball, you want some? Come get some. Bang! I heard she got traded for a used jockstrap and a dirty diaper. New team, same layup package. Bang! How about them eyeballs? You know what they say? Free throws ain't free. How about it? Bang! They say second time's a charm. Bang! No, it's not. How about the third time? Bang! Right, fine. The fourth one will go in. Flick that wrist, spin that ball. Wiggity, wiggity, bang!
She missed multiple layups, and not the kind that come from impossible defensive pressure or difficult shot-making situations. These were close-range finishes that players are generally expected to convert consistently at every level of basketball. That's why the reactions online were so strong afterward. A lot of fans started focusing on her finishing mechanics around the rim, pointing out how often she releases the ball from lower angles instead of fully extending through contact at the basket. And once people started highlighting it in slow motion and replay clips, it became one of those details viewers suddenly couldn't stop noticing throughout the game.
Yeah, favorite possession right here. Jam! Nah, not ready, not ready. Hands a little slippery. Fed too much popcorn with butter. Butter? Butter pecan!
How many times I gotta tell you, only 3 things in life are certain: death, taxes,
And Angel Reese smoking lamps, baby. Give me all that. Burn!
And then came the moment that really took over social media. Camila Cardoso, the player Chicago committed to building around after moving on from Angel Reese, met Reese at the rim and rejected her shot cleanly. The sequence was hard to ignore. Reese attacked the basket looking for a finish, but Cardoso read the play perfectly from the start, timed it beautifully, and erased the attempt without needing help defense or any kind of scramble. It looked controlled, confident, and completely deliberate. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere online. Fans replayed it from every angle because of what the moment symbolized as much as the block itself. What also stood out was the atmosphere inside the arena. The crowd didn't feel emotional about Reese returning or torn between old loyalty and new reality. If anything, the energy leaned heavily in the opposite direction. Chicago fans were fully behind the Sky, and the building reflected that tone throughout the night. Meanwhile, Atlanta entered the game close to full strength and still lost 87-78 to a Chicago team that wasn't even using its complete primary rotation. That result made the whole revenge game narrative much harder to sell once the final buzzer sounded.
Take a look at all the empty seats. Watch for yourself.
Angel Reese was shooting the 3 and way in the passing lane, forces a turnover, calls her own number.
That was highly injured. She fouled out of the
Angel Reese doing
some on the defensive glass.
opportunity to return home to Chicago, and now this league in year 12 blocks the Angel with the rebound.
After the game ended, Angel Reese sat down at the podium and laughed while discussing the Chicago Sky matchup, despite finishing the night shooting just 29% from the field. Ironically, that press conference moment ended up getting more attention online than almost anything she actually did during the game itself. And honestly, that contrast became part of the conversation. The personality, the confidence, the headlines, all of it remained loud, but the actual performance on the court told a very different story. What made it even more noticeable was the reaction from fans online. It wasn't outrage or anger flooding social media. Most people responded with sarcasm, memes, and jokes, turning the clip into another viral moment for reasons Reese probably didn't intend. After that, she headed to Atlanta, hoping a fresh environment and a home crowd would help reset the energy around her start with the dream. But then reality hit again. Gateway Center Arena in College Park only seats around 3,000 fans total. This isn't a massive professional venue packed with tens of thousands of people. It's a much smaller setting compared to most major basketball environments. And during Reese's home debut with Atlanta on May 3rd, noticeable sections of those seats still remained empty. That's what made the optics so rough. A player constantly discussed as one of the league's biggest personalities and most marketable names still couldn't generate the kind of packed atmosphere many people expected for such a heavily promoted debut.
This is fantastic for Atlanta, for visibility. I meant it when I said Atlanta's going to be lit, not just on the court, but off the court. They do a great job at the Gateway Center of selling out tickets, but they're going to be able to move games to State Farm Arena where the Hawks play now because of the Angel Reese effect.
The what? Come again? The Angel Reese effect? What in the hell is the Angel Reese effect?
Now, think about what that situation actually says for a player who has spent the last 2 years presenting herself as one of the defining faces of women's basketball. Someone who claims to influence culture, drive attention, and fill arenas wherever she plays. Those are massive expectations to set publicly. And realistically, Gateway Center Arena is not an impossible venue to pack out. The building holds roughly 3,000 fans, which by professional sports standards is relatively small. This wasn't a massive NBA-sized arena requiring tens of thousands of tickets to create a full atmosphere. On top of that, the matchup itself seemed perfectly designed for Atlanta to control the night. The Washington Mystics arrived without veteran center Shakira Austin and relied heavily on younger players and developing talent. A healthy dream roster playing at home against an inexperienced group should have looked like a major advantage on paper, but once the cameras started showing the crowd, the optics became part of the story. Empty sections were clearly visible throughout the arena, and that immediately sparked conversation online, because this was supposed to be a highly anticipated home debut for one of the league's most talked about personalities. And honestly, this is where the Caitlin Clark comparison naturally enters the conversation. Indiana Fever games consistently sell out. Even road games become major ticket events simply because Clark is coming to town. Opposing arenas fill up because fans want to see her play live, regardless of which team they support. That's the difference between talking about star power and actually generating it in real time. Clark doesn't spend interviews reminding people she moves tickets. The attendance numbers do that for her automatically. The impact shows up in sold-out crowds, rising demand, and the overall energy surrounding every game she plays. And when you compare those realities side by side, the contrast becomes difficult to ignore.
Last weekend, Caitlin Clark was in New York City to play the New York Lesbians. Over 14,000 people paid to see the Great White Hope. If I remember correctly, another 700,000 watched Caitlin Clark on TV. Unfortunately for Angel Reese, the citizens of Chicago, they were not the only ones who were unwilling to welcome her home. Her former teammate, Camila Cardosa, she welcomed Angel Reese home by dominating the queen of stat padding on the court.
Angel Reese's reputation has never really been built the same way as players whose impact immediately translates into team success, and her 2 seasons in Chicago became the biggest example of that disconnect. During her rookie year, the Sky finished 13-27. The following season, things declined even further, ending with a 10-34 record. Different year, same headlines, same attention around Reese individually, but the results in the standings never improved. That's what started catching people's attention over time. Her individual numbers continued to rise, especially in categories like rebounding, while the team itself kept struggling to win games consistently. Eventually, fans began noticing that the personal stats and the actual success of the franchise didn't seem to move together. So by the time Atlanta fans looked ahead to May 3rd, many already felt like they understood the larger picture. They weren't walking into the situation blindly because Chicago had already spent 2 years testing whether Reese's style of production translated into winning basketball. And when Atlanta then lost at home by 11 points to a young Washington Mystics roster in front of a crowd that visibly failed to fill the arena, it didn't feel to many people like some random off night. Instead, it looked like another chapter in a pattern that had already been developing long before Reese ever arrived in Atlanta.
Go wants to see if his defense improves, and that 7-2 run is behind.
Oh my!
Ball was blocked into the hand. They've had multiple all-stars on a team that were rookies.
Okay, work out.
Since the
Work out.
1999 season for the
Oh my
We've
goodness!
been talking about the big on bigs inside, and Erie fan tired of getting it. Angel Reese on the inside, double team. Still.
Terrible hoops. Horrible.
It wasn't a pretty night of basketball in College Park. The Washington Mystics came in and walked out with a comfortable win, led by a group of players many casual viewers would struggle to identify without checking the roster. And in a lot of ways, both the attendance and the final score ended up telling the same story from different angles. At the same time, something quietly started shifting back in Chicago after Angel Reese's trade officially went through. The interesting part wasn't just the roster move itself, it was who suddenly showed interest in the direction the franchise was taking afterward. But focusing back on May 3rd, the box score only shows the final result. The details underneath it are where things start to look rough for Atlanta if you were expecting a statement home performance. Kiki Iriafen, still early in her WNBA career and not yet a widely recognized name, came into that game as a second-year player still building her reputation. And yet she played with complete confidence inside the matchup. She finished the night by blocking Angel Reese 3 separate times. And that's where the context matters. This wasn't a seasoned veteran neutralizing a rookie. This was a developing player still carving out her place in the league, consistently stopping a highly publicized star at the rim. And for many watching, that's the moment that stood out most. Not just the result, but who was dictating the physicality inside the game.
She's got this nasty trick shot where she hip fires layups from 2 feet away, like that. That shot is her bread and butter. Butter, my God. Her form is cooked. That ball is so far away, it's in another solar system. Maybe she makes it. Nope. Checking out her boyfriend, Wendell Shorter Jr. Detroit fans chanting Angel Reese. 2 peas in a pod, Mr. and Mrs. Brick. No. Someone tell her there's not an incentive in your contract that pays you more money for missing layups. That's a pray up. I wanted to see a baby giraffe try to play Twister. I'd go to the circus. What is that?
The first rejection already set the tone. The second one had people replaying the clip just to make sure they saw it correctly. By the third block, social media accounts were already stitching the sequence together, because when a single player gets sent away from the rim 3 times in one game, it stops looking like a coincidence and starts looking like a clear matchup problem. What stood out was the pattern. Angel Reese tends to release her shot from a lower, more rushed motion around the basket instead of finishing strong through contact. And when defenders recognize that timing early, it becomes much easier to challenge at the rim. Kiki Iriafen, listed at the same height of 6 feet 3 inches, picked up on that read repeatedly throughout the game. Every time Reese went up, Iriafen was already positioned and ready to meet the shot at its highest point. After one of those blocks sent Reese to the floor, she got back up, locked eyes with Iriafen, and responded with a slow clap. It was a moment that instantly spread online, with many viewers interpreting it as a mix of frustration and an attempt to flip the energy after another lost battle at the rim.
Want to position her body, put the ball on the to go in.
8 on the shot clock. An inside touch to Lauren Betts, standing at 7 and able to finish over the outstretched hands.
Bruin on Bruin violence. Lauren out of Ole Miss, spent her first 3 seasons out of Ohio State. One of the 3 players that were picked for the Mystics in the first round in the draft is Lauren Betts with another bucket. That's going to be a problem. We're seeing pulls up, top of the key, in and out. Iriafen with a rebound and a quick dish to Betts.
Lauren Betts put together a 17-point performance and completely controlled the paint, making Angel Reese look uncomfortable in the one area of the floor where she's expected to dominate. That interior presence is supposed to be Reese's identity, but Betts dictated the matchup from start to finish. She scored through contact, drew fouls consistently, and forced Reese into tough defensive positions where she either couldn't stay in front or had to back off to avoid fouling out. By the end of it, some were even calling Betts the most dominant presence on the court, and she's a rookie playing her first preseason road game against a player who spent the entire offseason being marketed as Atlanta's new franchise piece. Reese also had a sequence where she ran through Georgia Amore for a foul, missed multiple looks she normally converts, and at one point turned her attention to the officials after a blocked shot instead of getting back on defense. And that mix of frustration, body language, and in-game reactions, the slow clap, the arguments, the visible irritation, lines up closely with what was reportedly already circulating inside Chicago when the trade happened in the first place.
Reese, 9 for Lauren Betts. They're guarding one another. Kiki Iriafen in on the action and kisses the timing chemistry with Ryan Howard. Backdoor, Olsen finishes. What a season up till today, that 3 has been smooth. 6 points, says Lauren Betts. The middy's good. Michaela Onyenuede and Shakira Austin out. Lauren Betts with the touch on the block. And she is making Lauren Betts. Got Indian Navarre in the air.
Atlanta's coach Carl Smisko spoke after the game about experimenting with lineups and developing bench options, which is usually coach speak for when the actual performance doesn't match the plan on paper. 2 games into her stint, and the staff is already shifting things around, trying to figure out what fits and what doesn't. And it's impossible to ignore the timing. Just 4 days earlier, Angel Reese sat at a podium after shooting 29% and laughed off the Chicago sky, acting like it was all behind her. But the internet didn't let that moment slide. Once Kiki Ariafan's 3rd block started circulating online, the reaction flipped immediately. No extra commentary was even needed. The clip did all the talking for her. While Reese was dealing with highlight reels of her getting denied in multiple cities, Chicago quietly started to look like a more balanced, more intriguing roster. And that shift didn't take long at all. It began almost the moment the trade went through. For 2 straight years, the narrative around the Sky was that they couldn't attract talent, that the market wasn't appealing, and that the organization was stuck in a cycle of underperformance. Reese was often framed as the piece holding everything together despite the losing. But that storyline didn't age well. In a matter of months, the reality around Chicago started to look very different.
Truth is, Angel Reese has never been a star basketball player. I'm not saying she's the drizzling shits, but Angel Reese has never been a star, and she has never been a winner in her brief WNBA career. Angel Reese is the queen of empty stats. She's one of the best players in the league in garbage time. When the Chicago Bravado were down 30 points with 5 minutes left in the 4th quarter, Angel Reese knows it's time to clock in and start dominating.
Here's where things start to shift in a noticeable way. Skylar Diggins-Smith, a 7-time All-Star, chose Chicago. Dejonai Carrington, who earned Most Improved Player honors and made the All-Defensive First Team in 2024, chose Chicago. Azura Stevens, a veteran with real postseason experience, chose Chicago as well. Then the Sky went a step further and traded for Rickea Jackson, a dynamic young scorer who immediately asked for Angel Reese's former number 5 jersey, a number she wore back in high school and at Mississippi State. Online, some of Reese's supporters pushed for the number to be retired, but in pro sports, that kind of honor is reserved for players who bring championships and deep playoff runs. Reese's Chicago tenure, on the other hand, ended with back-to-back seasons without a playoff appearance and records that slid from 13-27 to 10-34. Jackson is wearing number 5 now, and the front office didn't hesitate twice about it, and that's where the nobody wants to play in Chicago narrative starts to fall apart. Because once Reese was no longer in the picture, multiple established, high-level players looked at the Sky roster and made the same decision. That was a place they wanted to be, which raises a pretty clear question about what actually changed over those 2 seasons and what didn't.
You know, the dynasty starts after you not with you. Chicago Sky to Angel Reese. Woo-wee! I told you that AR disease ran deep. Nobody wanted to play with that. That is...
Now shift over to Indiana, because when Caitlin Clark arrived in 2024, the Fever's direction didn't just improve, it completely changed trajectory. They went from one of the worst teams in the league to a playoff appearance in her rookie year. That alone tells you how quickly things turned around. Players like Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hull stayed committed to Indiana because the environment started translating into wins. The system actually functioned. Clark's presence bent defenses, created cleaner looks, and made life easier for everyone around her. Indiana became one of those destinations players genuinely wanted to be part of, because being there meant competing for something real. Free agents noticed that shift immediately. Now contrast that with what happened in Chicago over Reese's 2 seasons. The record declined, the chemistry tightened in the wrong way, and reports suggested relief when the roster situation finally changed. Meanwhile, the new version of the Sky is built around spacing, ball movement, and defensive flexibility, modern principles Reese never really fit into given her limited perimeter shooting and defensive range. Chicago didn't just replace her, they rebuilt the roster to match the direction the league is actually moving in. And while that happened, Atlanta ended up with a player whose former team already looks like it moved on and improved without hesitation.
Traded away Angel Reese and then said, we're going in. We're going in. Right here, right now. Had to get her off the team to get these players to come here.
2 games. That's all it took for the disconnect between Angel Reese's image and Angel Reese's actual production on the court to become hard to ignore. And the preseason isn't even over yet. In that short span, you've already got Camila Cardoso sending shots back at the rim, Kiki Iriafen stacking blocks of her own, a 29% shooting night she brushed off at the podium, an 11-point home loss to a Washington Mystics group led mostly by young players, and attendance numbers that looked more like a low-interest minor league event than a professional showcase. And that's the early 2-game snapshot of the player being marketed as one of the faces of women's basketball. Atlanta still went out and made a real investment trading for Reese, but even now, just 2 games in, head coach Carl Smesko is already talking about lineup flexibility and experimenting with rotations. That's not standard preseason fine-tuning language. That's a staff already searching for combinations that actually work around a player whose skill set is raising structural questions on both ends of the floor. Because the issues aren't minor, Reese still doesn't space the floor with perimeter shooting. Her defensive coverage struggles against modern stretch forwards. And at the rim, her finishing continues to get challenged by defenders who are reading her angles before she even elevates. And when those weaknesses start stacking up this early, the adjustment period doesn't feel like preseason anymore. It feels like problem solving in real time.
And that speaks exactly to both what you were saying and Tanisha Patisse was telling us coming back from the break. Carl Smesko wants to see if his defense improves, and that 7-2 run is behind the defense. And she also, again, added this.
Atlanta is built on a space and pace identity. That kind of system only works when the floor is stretched, when multiple shooters force defenses to stay honest and keep the paint from getting crowded. But Angel Reese doesn't provide that spacing, which allows defenders to sag into the lane every time she's involved in the action. And when that happens, it doesn't just affect her, it disrupts the entire structure of the offense. Carl Smesko has built championship-level systems before at Florida Gulf Coast, so he understands exactly what fits and what doesn't. That's why, just 2 games into the experiment, you're already seeing lineup adjustments and rotation testing. Those aren't random preseason tweaks. They're early signs of staff conversations about fit and functionality under real game pressure. Meanwhile, Chicago looks like a completely different operation than it did a year ago. Skylar Diggins-Smith, Dejanai Carrington, Azura Stevens, Rikeya Jackson, and Camila Cardoso all on the same roster. Established players choosing Chicago after 2 seasons of the nobody wants to go there narrative. And they didn't arrive during the Reese era. They came after it ended. That timing matters because it suggests the direction of the franchise changed the moment the roster structure did. The New Sky group plays faster, spaces the floor properly, moves the ball with purpose, and aligns with how the modern WNBA actually operates in 2025. And they did it without forcing the system to revolve around a single interior first player who doesn't stretch defenses beyond the paint.
This is going to get real ugly for you-know-who. Get out. Get out. She got all kinds of ball on Angel Reese, but that wasn't even the worst one. Angel ended up getting all up in her feelings here. Oh, she gets mad. Oh, yeah, you got the shit blocked out of you. I mean,
Caitlin Clark never had to label herself as the it girl. The league did it for her through what actually happened on the floor and around it. Indiana's attendance surged. The Fever reached the playoffs in her rookie year, and established players started choosing Indiana as a destination. None of that came from speeches or branding campaigns. It came from winning basketball. That's the difference. Players want to be around Clark because her presence leads to results, and results bring everything else with them. Bigger stages, stronger contracts, postseason runs, and national attention. It's a reputation built on production, not promotion. Reese, on the other hand, has always needed the conversation around her because the on-court outcomes haven't consistently backed it up. 2 seasons in Chicago ended without playoff appearances. The record slid from 13-27 to 10-34, and reports even suggested relief inside the organization once the roster situation changed. Now she's in Atlanta, only a couple of games into a reset, but early signs of that fresh start are looking familiar. Half-empty seats, highlight clips going viral for the wrong reasons, and a coaching staff already adjusting rotations and searching for answers. Reese was supposed to bring energy, attention, and wins. So far, none of that has fully materialized, and the season has barely begun. At that point, it naturally raises the question people keep circling back to: what exactly is driving the hype in the first place?